My topic today is lay down your burdens. Lay down your burdens. Years ago, a story was told of a young boy who had went to his church for counseling. And he said that he felt like he just couldn't carry the load that he was carrying. And so the pastor of the church talked to him for a few moments, and he said, I want you to walk with me for a moment while we talk about what's going on in your life. And he took him into this rotunda where there was a picture of Atlas. You know, Atlas is supposed to be the strongest and built guy who can hold the world on his shoulders. But if you really look at the picture with a different set of lens, you would notice how Atlas is straining to hold up the world. In other words, he's doing it, but he's doing it with a lot of constraint. And so he pointed out to the young man, he said, you can choose to live like that. You can choose to live to try to carry the world on your shoulder and be under tremendous stress and strain to do it. And then he walked him across the street to St. Peter's Cathedral. This is on Fifth Avenue in New York. And he showed him a picture at the back of the altar. And at the back of the altar, the picture says, basically, it had a statue of a young Jesus, about 9 or 10 years old, who had the world on one finger with no straining and no stress. So the preacher said, you can choose to live. You have a choice to make. You can live like Atlas, or you can live like Jesus is living. You can have somebody who can take the stress off of you and put it on them, or you can choose somebody who's going to take your stress and not be able to do much with it. I thought it was a beautiful analogy when I first heard it, because when I look at the text and I see Paul giving us this command, and it is rather strange that we're living on this 11th day of October. It is springtime in America. And we're living on the second Sunday of October in the 21st century. And we are going back 2,000 centuries to a text that I believe has the potential to enlighten us, to set fire underneath us, and to help us to create a better church and a better world. Paul goes back to this text and he says, bear ye one another's burdens. The first thing we have to notice is that the word bear means to carry. And in biblical times, they had beasts of burdens, and such as donkeys and cows and ox and other animals who, when they people moved to faraway countries, they would put the load on the beasts so they would not have to carry the load themselves. In other words, they could walk without a load. And that's where the analogy comes from, bear, somebody else bearing the load. And to bear means to carry. And then burdens, of course, we know what that means. Because we all have burdens in our lives. A burden is something that we can't carry. That's why we give it to the beasts to carry, because it is too heavy for us to carry. And Reverend Hicks, I have the feeling that we have so many people living in our society where they have burdens that they cannot bear by themselves. But yet they try. They do the best they can to try to bear burdens alone, knowing that it is an impossible task. Jesus could not do it by himself. He had 12 disciples to help him carry his burdens and his concerns as he went through his 3-year ministry. And so burdens can be looked upon as anything. Anything can be a burden. Burdens of debt, burdens of death, burdens of marriage, burdens of graduating from school, burdens of trying to pay off your student loans, and burdens that we have in our own churches where we try to work together and somehow it just don't seem to be working out as we want it to be. We have burdens of college and burdens of political infrastructures. We have burdens that people put on themselves and burdens that others put on us. We have burdens that come from all angles of life. We're burdened down by the problems of life, burdened down by the concerns of life, burdened down by marriages, burdened down by relationships, burdened down by our children, and burdened down by the reason people do things, burdened down by murders and so forth. I was leaving Friday going down to the NAACP convention, and we passed by, Brad Thompson and I passed by the store down on the corner here. We saw about 5 police officers there, and we saw all the yellow tape, and nobody had to tell us what had happened. I didn't have to read the newspapers. I didn't have to look at the television reports. I already knew that somebody had been shot or murdered at that scene. And I found out when I got back that somebody was killed right at the grocery store next door. So we're burdened by those things. We're burdened about coming out of our houses at night because we're afraid that something like that may happen to us. We are burdened by the traffic that we see, that young people driving drunk and taking people, innocent people's lives. We're burdened by parents who don't take care of their children the way that God will demand that they do. We are burdened by our jobs and burdened by our careers, burdened by the positions that we are in. We are burdened by these things of life that sometimes don't really make sense. And believe me, there are some things that don't make sense. I wonder sometimes how in the world we make it with the things that's on our shoulders and the things that we have to bear by ourselves. And so when we look at the text, we think about the fact that God or Paul has given us an impossible task. He's given us a task that only Mr. Phelps from Mission Impossible can accomplish. It seems like there's something about the task that we just can't handle, bearing one another burdens. Some people say, I can't bear my own burdens. How can I bear somebody else's burdens? At first, at the onset, it seems impossible. It seems that we can't do it. It's something that cannot take place. But I don't believe that Paul would give us a command to do such if it was not true, that we're able to bear one another's burdens. And so what does it mean to bear one another's burdens? It means that you and I are to find our brothers and sisters who are under distress and try to help them the best that we can. It means that everybody on our pew is going through something, and it's our job to try to do the best we can to help them to make it through it. That's what it means. I hear people say, I'm too blessed to be stressed. You know why you're too blessed to be stressed? Because you're not helping anybody with their stress. Because if you help them with their stress, you'll get some of their stress on you. Amen, somebody. And so I don't like that narrative, I'm too blessed to be stressed. No, I got some stress because I'm trying to help somebody live out the life that God has intended for them to live. And I don't mind having that kind of stress when I'm trying to help somebody carry out the deeds that I know that God has given them. And so we have this mandate from Paul to bear one another burdens. And to bear burdens means to shoulder it, means to help them carry it. It doesn't mean that you take all that they have. I can't take every burden that you have. And there are some burdens I can bear with you, and there's some that I can't. I mean, I can help you deal with the death of your loved one. I can talk to you about that. I can deal with you about that. I can help you with your debt and show you ways in which you can save money and not spend every dime and buy every suit and buy every pair of shoes and every wig and every piece of hair that's on the market. I can help you with that kind of burden. Amen. I can help you when it comes to trying to get a house or trying to buy a car within your means. I can help you with those kinds of burdens and working with your children and trying to get them through school. I can help you with that. But there are some burdens I can't help you with that. I can't help you become famous. I can't help you become honorable. I can't help you achieve certain prestige in life. I can't help you with that burden that may be on you. Maybe you're burdened down because you want to be the HNIC. Sometimes I can't help you with that. That you want to be something that God has not designed for your life. There's some things I and other pastors and other people cannot help you bear. But God is not asking us to do that. He's asking us to help people bear the burdens that we're able to help them bear. Because there's some things that we can't take by ourselves. I'm still dealing with the death of my brother from last year. And I have people helping me every time I mention it to help me to bear that. My brother who died 10 years ago, I'm still dealing with the burden of that death. But there have people in my life to help me to deal with that. There are some things you can do on your own, but there's some burdens that you cannot bear. And so the analogy is that sometimes when the travelers in Jesus' time were going places, they put all the weight on the ox, or all the weight on the donkey, all the weight on the beast. And sometimes that beast will fall down under the weight because the beast cannot carry the weight. The beast cannot carry it. It's too much. And we're living in a time period where the weight on our shoulders is just too much. As we look around in our nation and we see so much going on, we see wars coming from all over. Somebody said there are 42 wars been fought on in the world right now. That's a burden that somebody has to carry. The people who are marching out of Syria and somebody is blocking them from coming into their territory. That's a burden that we must carry. They must carry. There are burdens that Mexicans and Latinos who have trying to come into the country to make living wages or make a wage to take care of their families. That's a burden that they have to bear. We have a burden that our drones and our missiles are destroying Doctors Without Borders hospitals where they're taking care of people who can't take care of themselves. That's a burden that our government has to bear. That burdens that taking away welfare benefits from people, taking away Medicaid from people. That's a burden that our government has to endure. There are burdens that destroy life. There are burdens that we have to deal with socially and politically and physiologically. There are burdens all around us. But Paul gives the mandate, bear ye one another burdens. And the first thing I noticed in the text is that he says that I noticed is that we don't have to bear everybody's burdens. And I'm glad about that. He said that some people, now some text says there are some people who have been overtaken by sin, overtaken by thought, overtaken by misrepresentation. Some people who have gone through it, but not everybody. So Paul is not speaking to everybody in the church or in the world, but he's speaking to some people, and I'm glad about that, because I can't handle everybody's burden. I can handle some, but not everybody. And I'm glad that Paul says take on the burdens that of people who are going through things in their lives that they can't handle themselves. It's not in order, it's a command. That you and I as Christians must do this. We must look at our brothers and our sisters in our pews who go to our churches, who are going through things, and ask them, what is it that I can do to help you bear this alone? You can't carry this by yourself. That's why people are dying and suffering and going through what they're going through, because nobody is coming to their aid and saying, what must I do to help you? What can I do? What do you want me to do? And I can only do what God gives me the tools to do. With the ability that he gives me to do. How can I help you with the burden that you're bearing today? And you ought to be able to leave this church today with your mind saying, has God put somebody in my life to help share a load of their burden? To take something off of their shoulders. You ought to leave here today asking yourself, am I an Atlas, or am I that 10-year-old Christ who is holding up the world on one finger? Well, you ought to leave here today knowing that you are a burden bearer. You can help somebody to bear the burdens that they are taking. And then he says, it's only for those who have been overtaken, those who have been trapped, those who have fallen into sin, those who have done wrong. Those are the ones that you must straighten out. Those are the ones that you must help bring back. He said to restore and bring back the ability of those who have fallen off the wayside, who have fallen off the ledge, who have fallen off the cliff, those who have suicidal thoughts, those who go out to colleges and kill innocent people, those whose mind has kind of playing tricks on them. Those are the ones that God demands that you step in and do something about. You have the power. Jesus said, greater power you would have than I will have, because I'm going to my Father, but I'm leaving the work for the church to do. You are the burden bearer. You are the beast that God has left here to help somebody overcome their problem. Now, we have no problem correcting the pastor when he's wrong, or even when he's right, because sometimes some of y'all don't know when he's right and when he's wrong. But we have no problem criticizing the pastor. That's easy. I'm an easy target for the church. But the person sitting beside you can be smelling like reefer, can be smelling like alcohol, can be smelling like they've been sleeping on the barn, and yet you won't say a thing. You won't reach over and say, brother or sister, is there anything that I can do to relieve some of the pressure that's on you? Nobody comes to me and asks me that. I haven't heard anybody yet, Pastor, I know you're going through stuff, but is there anything I can do to help you deal with your burden? I got some burdens now. I'm not going to give you the roll call, but I got some. But very few people come to a pastor and ask them, do they need help with their burdens? Because they think that we're supermen, that we can take anything you throw at them. It doesn't matter, whatever it is, they believe that a pastor, he can take it. He pray to God every day. How do you know that? I might have got him this morning and didn't even say a prayer. You don't know if I prayed or not. But I'm an easy target because people don't ask. Can I help my pastor with whatever burden that he may have? And then you got your neighbor right beside you, and you don't do it either. And you know they're going through something. You can see people in your church going through stuff. You know they have something that needs to be handled, and yet you won't look over and say, God bless your sister, God bless your brother. Is there anything I can do to help you with your burden? You know why you don't ask? Because you're scared they're going to, first of all, ask you for some money. That's the first reason. Well, if I ask that, what if you say, yeah, I need a couple of dollars, and the first thing you're going to say, well, I don't have that. But that ain't what Paul is talking about. He's talking about bearing something, carrying something. Can I help you carry your load of debt? Can I help you carry the death that you just experienced in your family? Can I help you deal with the rudimentaries of life? Can I help you deal with the things that you yourself have been broken down by? And so Paul gives us this narrative, but he says also that you don't go to anybody to help with your burdens. Look at what he says in verse 2. He said, or verse 1, he said, those of you who are spiritual are to restore, amen, with a spirit of what? Meekness or gentleness or calmness. That doesn't mean that I'm going to help you with your burdens, but I'm going to tell you what you got to do. And well, you need to do this, you need to do that. You can't go to help somebody pointing fingers. He said in a spirit of gentleness, a spirit of meekness, a spirit of love is how you would go about helping somebody to bear their burdens. And he said it must be somebody who is spiritual. Now, with the little education that I have, that implies to me that there are some folk in the church who are not spiritual. Now, you can interpret that any way you want, but Paul would not have said that if there were some folk in the church who were secular and not spiritual. There's a difference between secularization and spiritualization. Secular folk see the Bible as literature. They see it as, a good story. They see Jesus as, a good prophet, a good man, or somebody who just came by with a whole bunch of sayings and giving us things that we can live by. That's the secular world. But the spiritual world see Jesus as the Son of God. They see him as a miracle worker. They see him as a healer. They see him as a deliverer. They see him as somebody who can make a way out of no way. They see him as somebody who knows how to fix whatever you are going through today. That's what they see them dealing with. And so Paul says, make sure you go to somebody who's spiritual. And now the question is, how you know they're spiritual? Well, you've been in church 50 years. You ought to know. You ought to be able to look at somebody's life and tell whether they live a spiritual life or a secular life. Amen. Am I right? For your newcomers, it ought to be easy. Because spiritual folks won't act like you. They have a different point of view. They see things from a Jesus perspective rather than a world perspective. And so it should be pretty easy to figure out who the spiritual people are. And that's where you go to get your help, your burden, get some release. Stop going to folk who just want to know your business and then go out and tell everybody else. And you're wondering where it came from. You know where it came from. You told them. You told the wrong person. spiritual people should not, I'm not saying will not, but should not do that. If I confide in you something, I have entrusted that information to you and you alone. And if you go out and tell somebody, you have violated the trust that I have placed in you as a Christian. And so Paul says, go to somebody who is spiritual, but do it in love, do it in meekness, do it in a gentle way. Don't badger them, don't beat them upside the head. And you know you should have done it this way, you know this and you know that. That's not the way to do it. But gently show them where they're wrong. That drinking liquor all night and singing in the choir Sunday morning is not biblical. Or coming to church drunk is not what God requires us. Smelling like marijuana in the church is not what God is looking for. Or saying mean things to people in the church. This is a sanctuary. This is God's house. We call it holy ground. You don't say things ungodly in a church. Cuss people out. Make people move over. This is my spot. You ain't got no spot. Amen. I mean, I see new people coming to church and some of the old ones won't even move. Got to step all over a whole road just to get to a spot. Amen. Bear one another burdens, Paul says. And so in doing so, Paul says you would fulfill the law of Christ. So we're talking about two laws here, the law of Moses and the law of Christ. The law of Moses was a law that was exactly what it says, law. It was full of laws. They had taken the 10 commandments and turned them into about 600 different laws and put a burden on the people. Jesus talks about this in the book of Matthew 23. He talks about the Pharisees have put a burden on the people that the people cannot bear, and the Pharisees would not lift a finger to help them. And sometimes I wonder, is the church putting too much of a burden on the people that it's supposed to serve, and putting a load on them that they can't even carry? Well, our rules say, our Constitution says. Are we putting burdens on people that's weighting them down, and you wondering why they don't come? And you wondering where the folk are? Well, how about addressing some of the stuff or the burdens that you might be placing on the necks of people? Jesus talks about this. That's why he understood this. He said, come unto me, all that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest for my